Correa, De Leon, DeSaulnier, Dutton, Emerson, Evans, Fuller, Gaines, Hancock, Harmon, Hernandez, Huff, Kehoe, Lamaffa, Leno, Liu, Lowenthal, Negrete McLeod, Padilla, Pavley, Price, Rubio, Smidian, Steinberg, Strickland, Vargas, Walters, Wolk, Wright, Weiland, Yee.
Members, we are electing a quorum. Senators, please report to today's floor for session. Would the members and our guests be on the rail and in the gallery please rise? We will be led in prayer this afternoon by our chaplain, Rabbi Mona Alfie, after which please remain standing. We will be led in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag by Senator Lamaffa.
Good afternoon. Today is a day when many people's thoughts turn towards love. It is a time to appreciate and nurture the romance in our lives. But love is about more than flowers or candy or cards. It's about paying attention to the details of what resides in another person's heart and in our own. And it is ultimately about more than just this day. It is about how we treat those who matter to us every day. May the Holy One open our hearts to our friends and loved ones so that we might cherish and nurture the relationships that give meaning to our lives. May we take each and every day as an opportunity to express our love and our devotion to others. May this be God's will. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Privileges of the floor. Seeing none, messages from the governor will be deemed read. Messages from the assembly will be deemed read. Reports of committee will be deemed read. Members, motions, resolutions, and notices. Introductions and first reading of bills. Mr. Secretary, please read.
Senate Bill 267 by Senator Rubio, enacting to water quality. Senate Bill 268 by Senator Wright, enacting to school attendance. Senate Bill 269 by Senator Lamaffa, enacting to firearms. Senate Bill 270 by Senator Hernandez, an act relating to state employees, making an appropriation therefore and declaring the urge to take effect
Bills
immediately.
are deemed read. Members, can I have your attention? Thank you so much. Consideration of the daily file. Senate, third reading. Senator Leno.
Thank you, Madam President. Members, the next 30 measures are being sent over to the Assembly for purposes of becoming budget trailer vehicles. Meanwhile, the Assembly will send a like number of bills over to our House. And then these bills will contain the final implementing language for the 2011 budget. As you know, our subcommittees have been hearing various proposals brought forth by Governor Brown. We intend to meet this week in full committee on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and subsequently in Budget Conference Committee the following week to reconcile the differences between the houses. So I encourage us all to keep focused on the goal of our number of $26.4 billion, one way or the other. I know we each have our opinion how to get there, so I ask for an aye vote. And this would be on Senate Bill 69, Item 2.
Senator Dutton.
Yeah, Madam President and members. Last December, Governor Schwarzenegger had...
Senator Dutton, just a second. I think the Secretary needs to read the bill, and then I'm sorry, I'll call on you again.
No problem.
Senate Bill 69 by the Committee on Budget and Fiscal Review, an act relating to the Budget Act of 2011.
Thank you, Senator Dutton. Would you resume?
Yeah, once again, Madam President and members, last December, Governor Schwarzenegger had declared a fiscal state of emergency and called for a special session to take place, and that was to deal with the roughly about $7.5 billion in spending reductions at that time. And then January, Governor Brown reaffirmed the declaration of fiscal emergency and the need for action to reduce state spending. Now it's February, and we really haven't seen any actual action. My only question is, right now, do we intend to adopt all of Governor Brown's spending reductions as he has asked for us to do at this time? Yes, that's or a question of the president. I'm sorry, question of the author of Senator Leno.
So the votes that we're taking right now, these are procedural so that we will have bills in our hands, Assembly bills on this side, Senate bills on the other side, so we can proceed subsequent to our committee taking action by this Friday. So the Senate Budget Committee will have taken positions both on expenditures and revenue for our position to go into Conference Committee the following week.
Okay. Well, when I know this House has gotten into this long, drawn-out process, but what about the special session and actual reductions? Are we planning to make any are we going to make any spending reductions like now or any time in the next week?
I myself planning on voting for about $12.4 billion in cuts by the end of this week. We won't get to the floor until after Conference Committee. So we're going to have this taken care of in about 3 weeks' time.
Okay. Have you also asked the legislative analysts to provide a list of $13.5 billion as alternative spending reductions if the higher taxes are rejected by the voters?
Sure. What we requested of the legislative analysts on our first full budget committee hearing about 4 weeks ago, when he said we should not, as a legislature, be caught flat-footed should the proposed revenue not materialize in June, to be prepared to have to make a second round of about $12.5 billion in cuts. So I, at that time, asked him, could you, respectful of federal and state law, which will limit our options, provide us with a universe of where those cuts might be made? And that he has delivered to us, and so that is now been delivered to anyone in the press who has asked for it, or of course anybody else who asked for it.
Okay. I thank you, Senator
Sure.
Leno. I guess my concern here is with regards to the action being taken today, actually these bills are really placeholder more or less. There's nothing in them at this time. It'll be amended. They'll be going over to the Assembly. Then amendments will be made, and there'll be things put into this bill that, frankly, none of us know exactly what might be in them. Now, I understand that this has become a common practice of the House to do this during normal budget procedures. I guess in light of the fact that we've had both Governor Schwarzenegger and now Governor Brown calling us into a special session for the purpose of making spending reductions to clarify the take care of current year, I'm really confused as to, we're not confused anymore, but I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me that we're going through the normal budget process when we haven't even dealt with the current year fiscal problem issues. We all know there's got to be reductions that are going to have to be made. We ought to go ahead and take those up immediately. The concern I have with these bills here is that nobody knows for sure exactly what's going to be in them. Therefore, I plan to lay off on this motion, and I would encourage my fellow legislators to also consider laying off or voting no. Thank you.
Senator Steinberg.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I understand Senator Dutton's point here. We don't know exactly what will be in these bills over the next several weeks, but I want to reiterate what Senator Leno said a moment ago. The Senate Budget Committee, and then ultimately this House after conference committee, will vote to cut approximately $12.5 billion from the state budget. Can't say it any more publicly than that. So if there's any concern that these vehicles are somehow a way around the very difficult decisions that we know we have to make to put our fiscal crisis behind us here in California, don't worry, we know what we have to do. Thank you.
Absent further discussion, Senator Leno, would you like to close, please?
Sure, thank you. Just to reiterate, because Senator Dutton had raised the issue, the $12.5 billion in cuts, which have been referenced, would deal with both the current year and the budget year. So we're dealing with the emergency issue which caused the emergency session to be called. We're dealing with all of it this week in Budget Committee. I would ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Alquist? Aye. Anderson? No. Berryhill? Blakesley? Calderon? Aye. Canella? Corbett? Aye. Correa? Aye. De Leon? Aye. DeSaulnier? Aye. Dutton? Emerson? Evans? Aye. Fuller? Gaines? Hancock? Aye. Harmon? Hernandez? Aye. Huff? Kehoe? Aye. LaMalfa? Leno? Aye. Liu? Aye. Lowenthal? Aye. Negrete McLeod? Aye. Padilla? Aye. Pavley? Price? Rubio? Aye. Smidian? Aye. Steinberg? Aye. Strickland? Vargas? Aye. Walters? Wolk? Aye. Wright? Aye. Wyland? No. Yee? Yee, aye.
Ayes 22, noes 2. Senate Bill 69 passes. If I could have you please take your seats. And I'd like to explain a little more before we go on what our next action will be and then I will turn to Senator Leno again. Members, we are now going to take this same bill and we are going to ask to apply the previous roll call for items 3 through 31. And so we will not have to go through every one of the 31 bills again. So with that, Senator Leno, will you please make your request?
The request is for unanimous consent. Thank you.
Without objection, Secretary, please read.
Senate Bill 70 by the Committee on Budget and Fiscal Review, an act relating to the Budget Act 2011. Senate Bill 71 by the Committee on Budget and Fiscal Review, an act relating to the Budget Act 2011. Senate Bill 72 by the Committee on Budget Act and Fiscal Review, an act relating to the Budget Act of 2011. Senate Bill 73 by the Committee on Budget and Fiscal Review, an act relating to the Budget Act of 2011. Senate Bill 74 by the Committee on Budget and Fiscal Review, an act relating to the Budget Act of 2011. Senate Bill 75 by the Committee on Budget and Fiscal Review, an act relating to the Budget Act of 2011. Senate Bill 76 by the Committee on Budget and Fiscal Review, an act relating to the Budget Act of 2011. Senate Bill 77 by the Committee on Budget and Fiscal Review, an act relating to the Budget Act of 2011. Senate Bill 78 by the Committee on Budget and Fiscal Review, an act relating to the Budget Act of 2011. Senate Bill 79, Senate Bill 80, Senate Bill 81, Senate Bill 82, Senate Bill 83, Senate Bill 84, Senate Bill 85, Senate Bill 86, Senate Bill 87, Senate Bill 89, Senate Bill 90, Senate Bill 91, Senate Bill 92, Senate Bill 93, Senate Bill 94, Senate Bill 95, Senate Bill 96, Senate Bill 97, Senate Bill 98, and Senate Bill 99.
Without objection, the previous roll call will be applied to items 331. Ayes 22, noes 2. Measures pass. Members, we will return to motions and resolutions. And Senator Woke had her mic up. Did I?
For purposes of introduction.
Please begin.
All right. Eric, would you join me? Members, I'd like to introduce you to Eric Curries, who started a run that started in his hometown of Manteca last year and ended 3 days later on the steps of the state capitol. He was then a fifth grader at Manteca's Durham Ferry School, and he made the 65-mile run to raise funds for earthquake relief in Haiti with his parents, who are here today, Adrian and Carlene Curries, as well as his sister, Ariana. They followed in an RV where he slept each night. His run for Haiti was undertaken he was the young Manteca City Ambassador for the scholarship program of something called Manteca Youth Focus, which is a youth group which focuses on leadership development, volunteerism, and education. He collected nearly $2,000 in sponsorships for Doctors Without Borders for its Haitian relief efforts. He's now 12, and he attends Neil Hafley Elementary School. Please join me in welcoming and thanking Eric for all of his wonderful contributions.
And now we will be leaving privileges of the floor to return to motions and resolutions. Senator Price.
Adjourn in memory.
Please.
Thank you, Madam President. Members, I rise to adjourn the Senate today in the memory of Andy Emutin of Sacramento, who was the beloved uncle of Rosalind Plumano from the Senate BNP. Mr. Emutin was one of the original Filipino workers who went on strike in 1965 with Cesar Chavez. Before his death on February the 2nd, he was one of the last two living Filipino workers from that era. He remembered his work with the UFW to protest the low wages paid by the Delano growers, $1.10 an hour. He remembered the experience this way. The Filipinos and the Mexicans joined as one on September the 16th to picket the Delano workers, the Delano growers. On March 17, 1966, we set out on a march from Delano to Sacramento and initially had only 70 farm workers and volunteers. But by April 11, as we climbed the steps of the state capitol, there were 10,000 supporters who had joined us in the cause, unquote. He lived in Sacramento for the last few years and remained active in UFW issues and in the Filipino community here in Sacramento and in Stockton. He died suddenly of a heart attack while visiting the Philippines. He's survived by his wife, 5 children, and numerous grandchildren. And we adjourn today in his honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Price. And if you could bring your name to the desk, thank you. Senator Huff, for what purpose do you rise?
Condition of the file.
Condition of the file. Please proceed.
Members, those of us in budget subcommittees have been working diligently to find ways to find the efficiencies in our current fiscal situation. And when we moved this package of placeholder bills forward just a little bit ago with Republicans laying off, we were told by the budget chair and also the pro tem that they are prepared to vote for about $12.5 billion worth of cuts in the next few weeks. My question is, when are we going to identify those other $4.5 billion worth of cuts? Because the budget that's been laid out so far is $8 billion of cuts, not 12.5. It's $14 billion of revenues, not 12. And it's $6.5 billion of fund shifts. You can't call redevelopment taking from local government $1.7 billion or taking from Prop 10 or redirecting from Prop 63 and calling that state cuts. It's not. So we're pleased that you are planning to make $12.5 billion worth of cuts to follow through on what has been portrayed as a balanced budget act, and we will be there with you working in the trenches.
Senator Steinberg.
Senator Huff, respect your opinion, of course, as the vice chair of the Budget Committee, but disagree with you completely about your characterization of what is a cut and what is not a cut. To take $1.7 billion from redevelopment, you talk to our colleagues in local government, they will tell you it's a cut. It's $1.7 billion less money that will go to that government activity. Prop 63, I know a little bit about it. That $800 million is intended to be on top of the core base of funding for mental health. Instead, it will mean an $800 million loss in services that would otherwise be delivered. And so we'll have plenty of time to debate these issues in Budget Committee, but we don't want the record to respect your opinion. So wanted to make sure that we put on the record that the governor's proposal contains $12.5 billion worth of cuts, and we're happy to have that debate with you. Thanks.
Senator Dutton.
Yeah, condition of the file. I was in local government for a long time, and both as a small business operator and as well as a member of a city council and so forth. And I remember back then, I was always criticizing Sacramento because it just seemed like they couldn't keep their fingers out of my local monies in order to satisfy the general fund of Sacramento. The reality of life is when we talk about making program reductions or cuts, it should be from those programs that the state is responsible for funding in the general fund. That does not, the $25 billion problem we have is not with programs and things down at the local level or funded at the local level or has anything to do with the dollars they use to create the jobs at the local level. So the reality is when we start finally getting around to the cuts, here, the state programs or the different changes we want to make, the reforms we want to make, let's make sure that we're actually doing them with the state programs and issues that are being funded for out of the general fund. And I think that's where parts of our concern is right now. The $12.5 billion of what we're saying is cuts to the general fund are going to deal with the $25 billion deficit that we are having over the next year and a half, or now a year and 3 months. $1.7 billion of that from the RDA does not solve the problem. It may end up solving the problem as far as needing it to show it on the balance sheet, but let's not make any mistake about it. We're not reducing programs. We're not reducing anything. The local money that's being used by the local entities with those dollars, those are separate and apart from what we should be messing with. Just like what we did when we did vehicle license fees and those other things from the past. You know, that was not our dollars to spend or our dollars to deal with. Neither is the $1.7 billion from the local RDAs. That's money they use for programs that we don't have any real any business messing with anyway. So let's be honest about everything. The fact of the matter is there should be $12.5 billion of cuts on the general fund. It shouldn't be just taking money from one source and moving it over to another. That's not a real cut. That's more of the same smoke and mirrors that we've used in the past that's gotten us into this trouble. Let's at least be honest about what we're really reducing in the way of program cost, not just transferring monies from one entity to another.
Senator Wolk, for what purpose do you rise?
Adjourn in memory when it's appropriate.
Senator Steinberg? Senator Wolk, I believe it is, for what purpose do you rise?
Adjourn in memory, Madam.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask the Senate to adjourn in memory of Lou Leary, who died on February 12th of this year. Lou was a longtime employee of the state legislature. He began working for Assembly Majority Leader Tom Hannigan in 1987. And following Tom Hannigan's departure from the legislature, Lou went to work for the Assembly Speaker and worked for the Assembly for the following speakers. He was the Speaker's eyes and ears at the back of the chamber. He was floor director for 5 speakers, and he worked on making the daily business of the Assembly more efficient and effective. He created or helped to create many of the processes that the Assembly still uses today relating to floor actions, re-referral of bills, and other procedural motions and rule waivers. He married Pat Garrett, and that was an inter-house marriage in 1991. Pat had worked in the Senate, Lou in the Assembly. They raised twin daughters who are now high school juniors in the city of Davis, Claire and Erin. Lou was a terrific mentor and teacher to those of us who knew and worked with him closely. He was also a passionate music fan, especially of Bob Dylan. The services are pending. He'll be missed by many in Yolo County, and he was truly loved by those who knew him here in the building on both sides of the aisle, and our thoughts are especially today with Pat and the girls. Pat was through his side throughout his very, very difficult final weeks. I ask the Senate to adjourn in his memory.
Senator Wolk, if you'll proceed with your name to the desk. Thank you. If there is no other business, Senator Steinberg, the desk is clear.
Members, session will resume Friday at 9 o'clock, but of course in the meantime, the Democratic caucus will convene tomorrow at noon, Thursday at noon, 12:30, and Friday after session. And the Budget Committee, of course, will meet as a whole beginning Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Thank you.
I'd also like to note that February 18th is the last day to introduce bills. The desk is open 9 through 5 p.m. The Senate will be in recess until 3:30, at which time the adjournment motion will be made. We will reconvene Friday at 9 a.m.